Down Radio 87.7 FM. And welcome to our show, Steps Out of the Darkness and Into the Light. And we are your hosts, Shaila and
Josez Pinder.
So we're just going to do a quick recap of last week's show. So last week we spoke about grief, loss, and its manifestation. And we were looking at one of its manifestation, gambling harms. I would like to also advise people that's listening that Shama Women's Centre is having a live online workshop around bereavement, loss and grief tomorrow from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. So if you'd like to join, please email on counselling161@gmail.com, or you can contact Shama Women's Centre on 0116 251 4747. Shama Women's Centre also offer bereavement counselling, and also organisations such as Cruz, Laura Centre and Amitai Counselling also offer bereavement, loss and grief counselling. So on this show today, we'll help you understand yourself mentally, emotionally, physically and spiritually, using both psychological insight and real-life wisdom. A disclaimer: the information shared during this radio show is for general information and educational purpose only. The therapist advice and insights are based on their professional experience and should not be construed as personalized therapy or guidance for any individual case. If you are experiencing mental health concern, please seek the help of a licensed therapist or mental health professional. The views expressed by the therapist are their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the radio show. So today's theme, what we're going to be looking at, is many of us experience, but we rarely talk about it, isn't it, Joe?
Yes.
And it's the stigma around mental health, around culture struggles, and how these are linked to generational trauma and patterns and behaviors, and even generational curses. So why do some cultures dismiss mental health struggles? Why do we see patterns of pain, silence, and struggle passed down through generations? And most importantly, how do we break free?
Okay, lovely, Charlotte. Thank you for that introduction. Yeah, an interesting topic today, generational trauma and patterns of behaviour alongside mental health and stigma that often accompanies Black and ethnic minority cultures. As the listeners out there today listening, if you have or have experienced any of what we're talking about today, please feel free to call in with your insights, with your experiences, and with any questions that you might have regarding the topic that we're having today. So, Shaila, where do we start?
So if you'd like to call in, you can call us on 0116 48 22086, or you can WhatsApp us on 077 488 55055. We are also live on Facebook, Instagram and YouTube.
Okay, lovely.
So if you have ever heard the phrases, "Oh, just be strong," "That's just life," or mental health is a Western problem, give us a call and let's talk about it. Did your family ever talk about emotions openly, or feelings were ignored? Call in or WhatsApp us. We'd love to hear from you and share your experience.
Okay, so mental health, the stigma. Shaila, what do we think about stigma?
I hear this a lot. And, people that struggle mentally, have you noticed majority of them are even like, they don't want to cry. They want to cry. They feel like they want to cry, but they don't cry. Why? Because it's regarded as weakness.
Yeah.
And I think that's the big stigma around mental health, is that you can't cope with what's happening in your life, and you can't handle it and you are weak, so we put a pretense on, don't we? Rather than seeking the support that we need.
I think stigma is a bit like an attachment. It attaches itself to individuals, to collective cultures, and it silences people. Stigma is very much an invisible mark of disgrace, disdain, shame, negative, preconceived notions and ideas and attitudes and beliefs and stereotypes that we often have due to our experiences individually, but also the experience of past that has been passed down.
Yeah. I think also lack of awareness. People don't understand what one might be going through. They don't understand themselves, but if we look at how people operate today and the generational trauma that's been passed on, no one's addressed the problem. And this is why it gets sent down. And then people are unaware of what's happening to them. And this is where stigma then, people are quick to... For me, stigma is like, if I put it in a picture, it's like someone pointing their finger at you. That's how I see it. Like, you're X, Y, and Z, or you're doing X, Y, and Z. And that's what stigma is. And then making them feel different because they're doing something different to what they believe and what they see and how they operate.
Stigmatization is a labeling, but it's an oppressive label.
Yeah.
And anything that you oppress or suppress will, in some shape or form, become depressed.
Yeah.
If you've got one, you've got all three happening.
It's like when you point the finger, how many fingers are pointing back at you?
Definitely. I think for a lot of our individual people within our cultural backgrounds and our ethnicity, historically, culturally, economically, systematically, within families, within religion, within traditions, within cultures, we have our own internalized stigmatizations that we hold on to and that we are forever perpetuating through these cycles from our parents, from their parents, from their parents. And it's filtering through and it's coming back around. It's like we are constantly repeating these circles that are becoming cycles within our communities. We're not having the uncomfortable conversations that we need to be having to break these cycles.
That's hard, yeah, and that's it. Being accepting to be able to have these uncomfortable, or as I say, lift the rug up, because it seems like everyone sweeps everything underneath the carpet. Okay, so something happened, but they won't address it. They'll just sweep it under the rug, and it gets piled up and gets piled up. If we were to look at, different types of stigma, so I've got like here, we touched upon mental stigma. I've also got social stigma, so such as divorce, infertility, abuse are taboo in some cultures, so making it hard for people to like speak out. And in some cultures, divorce is seen as a failure, even if they're in a toxic relationship. They must endure that, because having a divorce is worse than staying in an abusive relationship.
But where is this coming from? This is generational. This is almost a preconditioning that we have within our cultures and our societies, where we're not having the awareness of certain behaviours or certain generational patterns of behaviours that are continuing. We're not having those conversations that need to be had.
What do you think, stops people from having these conversations or being real with it? Why is it so difficult for people to, work through the problem rather than hiding from it or suppressing it?
Interesting question, Shaila, but the first thing is, how can you work through something if you don't know you've got something to work through? The lack of awareness is evident.
Yeah.
People are in denial. There's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing wrong within my family. This is how it is. This is how it's ever been. This is how it will always be. So if you have a lack of awareness, that means that you're not even seeing or understanding that there is something there that you need to pay attention to. You have to have awareness. Then from your awareness, you have the acknowledgement of, okay, this is an issue.
Yeah.
And then you need to go about addressing the issue, which means to take care of the issue while taking care of yourself in the process. After you've had the addressing of the issue, there needs to come a space where there's an apology. And often you might look for the apology externally, but sometimes you've got to apologise to your own self for what you didn't know then, for what you didn't understand. And then it comes with acceptance.
Yes. But I'm thinking, there's some that recognise that something isn't right here and we've gone the wrong way about it. But I also feel like they think it's too late to make the change. They think that, I've already lived this long and I've had all these children and they've all grown up and I don't need to look into it. It's done and dusted with.
Well, the thing is, it's never too late to become aware and to address these deep-rooted issues, because I guarantee you now, and I've seen it, and I'm sure you've seen it in your therapeutic space and with clients, I've got clients on doing generational work from their parents.
Yeah.
Sat in 2025. And it's often one person coming to therapy because these patterns of behaviour and these generational traumas have filtered down and nobody has addressed them. Nobody has said, actually, I need to look at this and this needs to stop.
Yeah. So if we look at some examples of trauma, generational trauma and patterns. So I can give you an example. So if your grandparents fled a war, maybe oppression or poverty, you might have inherited a fear-based mindset, always feeling on edge, unsafe or unworthy. If your parents had a difficult childhood, they may have struggled with expressing love or emotions, and now you find yourself emotionally distant or anxious. If your family has experienced racism and discrimination or abuse, they may have been taught, teach you to keep your head down, just work hard, and, instead of addressing, the mental struggles behind what you have experienced. And this takes me back, like, when I look back at so I'm born in 81. I was born and lived in Bolton, Farnworth area, till I was at the age of 9. And that was English area. You wouldn't see any Indians or Arabs or anything like that there. And when I reflect back, I would have thought that I would have experienced the most racism there or stigma there, but I had the best childhood anyone could dream of. We were so close with our neighbours. We celebrated each other's important festivals. We honoured each other. We were there for each other. I could come up with so much childhood memories. But my mum thought, at the age of 9, because there wasn't any Islam or religion aspect around, she was fearful that we may grow up without religious teachings. So part of my family went to move to Leicester, found that it's a multicultural place, there's mosque there, there's Islamic teaching. So we moved to Leicester, thinking that's going to be the best move for us. But coming here to Leicester, it really did a 360 on the whole family. Everything was different. My mum was so open in Bolton. She was happier there. But coming here, I remember people saying to my mum, your girl shouldn't be like this. They shouldn't be dressing like this. They shouldn't be doing this. What you doing? And my mum became so uptight. Then I think everything went on lockdown for us. And it was such a, number one, culture shock, because we wasn't used to, I felt suppressed. I couldn't go out in my skirt when I was 9, 10 years old because people were saying, you're Muslim, you need to cover your legs or cover your hair, or you shouldn't be doing this and you shouldn't be doing that. And I felt like I understand the Islamic version of it, but I was a young child. I'm still going into it. And it's not that about the things that we do. Like growing up now, I understand it's more of the connection with Allah. But it was so fear-based. Like if you don't do this, you're going to go hellfire. If you don't do this. So grew up in fear. My mum grew up in fear of people pointing fingers at her because her daughters are doing X, Y, and Z. And I think it's such a different dynamic being in an English culture, being free, being able to express ourselves freely. Then coming here, I felt so like suffocated. And I think my whole family felt so suffocated. And I think my mum definitely experienced it the worst.
So that would have also had an impact on her mental health, the stigmatization.
Yeah.
But it would have probably been worse because it would have been coming from and within the community.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. Like, I would have thought being among, you know, when you feel like you're among your own, you know, there's that love and there's that compassion, support. But what I notice is it's not that much. People are quick to point fingers rather than be united. And like you said, have those uncomfortable conversations. Be open to hear people's stories and experiences and what it means for them rather than judging them. Because once you judge, you've closed that door. Yeah. That person can't trust you, and then they're suffering internally. Then that suffering goes onto the children. So nothing is getting done. And that's what I'm saying. When are we going to lift the carpet? And it's not for everyone to do, you know, to break these curses, to these patterns or behaviors, you know. I always felt like there is that, you know, people are gifted, chosen, you know, to break these kind of generational traumas, patterns and stigmas. You know, people, I will say people may call them the black sheep of the family, or how do you like to call it, Joe?
The black swan.
The black swan. And I like to also call it the chosen one. Whenever I see someone struggling the most, I'm like, you're special. They're like, what's so special about me? I go, I'm telling you, you are special because you're going against things that have been there for decades. And I know that you're struggling because it's not for the lighthearted. It is a journey in itself when you're going to break these, you know, generational traumas, and you will feel like everyone is against you. But when you know, if I look back, I knew since I was little that I was something different. You know, I never got along, you know, as with my other siblings. Like my mum would say, go right, because she said so, and this is the way it's supposed to be, because this is what she's been conditioned. I'm like, no, I'm going the other way, because that's what makes sense to me. That looks like it's more peaceful there. That looks like I'm going to be suffocated. And I think that was a dynamic in my family where I'm doing the opposite, but they're seeing it as what?
Rebellion.
As rebellious. They're seeing it as bad behaviour.
People will often fear that which they don't understand and hate that which they cannot conquer.
Yeah.
The thing is that there seems to be a pattern that there is one in every family that a generation... We call it a generational curse breaker. Yeah. Yeah, spiritually, it's that person that is born into a family that at some point they're saying, no, this can't continue. This has been going on for decades. This isn't working. Yeah. And they're the ones that are almost there to facilitate change, growth, but also, most importantly, healing.
Yeah, and it's important that you say, you know, the generational curses, because as much as it can be done physical to us, emotionally, mentally, there is a spiritual aspect.
Most definitely.
As well. So if you want to just elaborate more in regards to the spiritual side of generational trauma as well.
Psychology refers to it as generational patterns of behaviour.
Yeah.
There is generational curses, and there are things that are within our bloodlines. Yeah. And there are things that within our families that just keep getting replicated and replicated. They keep getting replicated because they won't be addressed. And until they're addressed, we will still keep having to learn the lessons. Yeah. And it's so not until we learn the lessons, they're going to keep repeating.
And as you said earlier, you know, as well, it's things that have also been spoken over us. You know, people that have said stuff to us. We ourselves, you know, spoken things over us. And it's freeing ourselves also, you know, from what has been said upon us and our bloodline. Yeah, the curses,
and
yeah.
trauma comes from what is spoken verbally, what is uttered out of someone's mouth onto us.
Yeah.
And sometimes, you know, you have probably noticed it and seen it within our communities, is that we're very quick to curse.
Yeah.
Curse our children, say these things, speak these words,
Yeah.
and not understanding that words have power.
Power. Yeah.
So when you're speaking certain words into your children, into your partners, into your family members, you know, so a man thinketh, so he becometh. And this is where we also need to take stock and have some accountability for our changes, because we need to change how we are doing things.
Yeah. You know, when you speak a certain way, especially to a child and they're developing, you know, we have to be mindful, like our brain takes a long time for it to be developed. We're in our early 20s and it's still developing, you know, and it's like a sponge. So you say something and you may apologize later, I'm sorry I said it, but it's already made the impact.
But you speak about the brain, but you speak about the brain and the head. Let's say about the heart. What is happening to the heart of that child when you're speaking those sort of words into them?
Yeah.
Their hearts are becoming hardened.
The heart, their soul.
The hearts become hardened.
Yeah. And we wonder why people
are as they are, because they're hurt.
Yeah.
We've got children walking around with wounds. We've got adults walking around with wounds.
We've got adults trapped in, not trapped, but they're still operating from the inner child, the wounded inner child.
And that will often come from generational.
Yes.
How many generations are parenting their parents? How many children are parenting their parents?
Yeah.
Because conversations and certain generational patterns of behaviour haven't been addressed. Too often we're seeing this.
Yeah. And if you notice, looking back, there's certain things that will repeat itself. History will repeat itself maybe in your family and in your family dynamics. I also feel like I see as God, as Allah, saying this needs to be addressed. So it's going to happen. History will repeat itself. And I think it repeats itself and you may experience it because you need to know what it's like to be in that experience, to feel it, also to be able to understand it. Sometimes people may not understand fully what you've been through unless you've also gone through it yourself in some aspects.
I was listening to someone the other day, I cannot remember his name, but he said the one thing that we can learn from history is that we never learn.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's quite profound, because it's so true.
Yeah, because
we can glance back and look at history, and yet we will still look at history and still continue the same pattern.
Yeah, it may not be as it was, but I can still see it happening today. Racism is still happening. Discrimination is still happening. Stigma is still happening. You know, we're still judging. We're still there.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not as enforced as it was back in the days, but it is still there. So what are we changing, people? And how hard is it? What is it that stops us from changing? Please call in or text us in on 0116 48 or text us on 077 488 55055.
Addressing these issues, we need to look at addressing them not only as individuals, because every individual is carrying their own trauma in some shape or form, but also collectively. So from the individual to the family to then the society and the communities. This can't just be addressed by one person.
Yeah. And just when you say that, are people willing to help that person? You know, some people, they're so, in a way, they disregard that person because they see them as they've got behavior issues, or you're the bad one, or you're causing problem in this family, you know, rather than sit with them. What's going on? What are you feeling? And they will talk to you. Look, mom or dad, You know, you're doing X, Y, and Z, but in my heart, I don't feel this is right anymore. You know, or if you've experienced it yourself. So there may be something where your parents had gone through and they've did what they did at that time the best they know. But it might not have been the right way because then it's been passed over to you. So now it's yours to take and see how are you going to deal with that experience or trauma. How are you going to make the change, or are you going to pass it on to your children?
The thing that we might also have to remember is that while our parents and generations before us have experienced and gone through certain things, they could only have done with what they had and the knowledge that they understood at the time. Now that we are understanding more, knowing more, we need to do better.
Yeah. And it's not being... I understand that aspect and having compassion, you know, for them.
Most definitely.
That they did their best that they could do.
With what
but
they
I
had.
do also feel everyone has that responsibility upon themselves, you know, to seek knowledge, you know, if they have done wrong, to do right now. It's never too late. Don't ever think that it's ever too late to start making changes, to do, like you said, that apology. You know, doing apology to someone that you feel like, you know, you've wronged and it's impacted on them can remove so much from that person.
It can.
It can they'll feel so much relief because all their life they felt like they were burdened with feeling a certain way because of the way they've been treated.
Unhealed generational wounds will become infected. Just like if you had a physical wound, if you don't clean that, if you don't take out the debris that's within that, it's going to cause an infection.
Yeah.
And where does an infection spread? From the wound, it will spread around your body. It's the same thing. If we don't start addressing and taking care of these wounds that our generation has, the next generation is going to be in casualty. Yeah.
So what patterns do you see in your family? Emotionally avoidance, anxiety, anger, people-pleasing? How has past generations in your family dealt with struggles? Did they talk about the emotions or was silence the norm? You know, looking back in my family, no, could not talk about feelings in a safe space. You know, it was very much, you need to get on with it. My mum and dad were very much get on with it. You know, when I reflect back, they're both immigrants coming here. Mum come from, you know, Africa, dad from Yemen. And dad came here when he was 16 years old, you know, and surviving on his own at 16 age, you know. And I think dad picked up a very controlling kind of attitude towards trying to survive. And what dad didn't realize was probably that he passed that down to us, that we became very much in that, the aggression was there. So I had to work a lot on my aggression because I knew I had the anger. And I know that it feels like an imprint.
Yeah.
You know, when you've been imprinted, I felt very much, it's only doing, you know, work on myself and years of therapy, I felt like a release. It was actually a physical release, I felt.
Yeah, I call it the echo.
Yeah, it felt like something was lifted off me, literally, because then I decided to not be that way.
It's the echo. It's a reverberation of the sound long after the initial sound's been made. So your dad's anger just reverberated within you and kept going and kept sounding. Yeah. So it ends up triggering your internal alarm system. Yeah. That's trauma.
Yeah, and then not noticing, like, being that way with the children, then you're like, I'm doing the same thing. And sometimes, you know, we're not aware of it. Yeah. And then you're like, okay, what's going on here? You know, it's like sometimes I'll pick up on my behavior and go, that's just like mum and dad, you know. No, that can't be. You know, this is when I recognize that, okay, I'm not going to continue because I didn't want to continue. I felt like I struggled a lot with my childhood. Yeah. So I know I had to flip the script. So I had to then get the help that I needed to be able to reverse that. And that's when I felt like, okay, things are changing for me now.
What was it that made you get to the point that you thought, I need help, because I think a lot of people know that something is wrong. Fear creeps in, and the lack of acknowledgement, the lack of awareness, the lack of understanding. Where do I go to learn how to navigate this, to learn how to address this? Earlier you mentioned the word deal, you know, me and the word deal are not friends. Yeah.
Address.
Anything that you're having to deal with, you're not dealing with, it's
You're
dealing with
fighting
you.
it. Yeah.
It's a fight.
Yeah.
When individuals are coming to look at their trauma and their generational trauma, it shouldn't be a fight. They've been fighting for way too long. It needs to stop. This is where they need to come and have their needs and wants addressed, which is to be taken care of. And especially in a therapeutic space, that is so important, that they know that, you know, this is not a boxing ring, as I often refer to my therapy room. It's not a boxing ring. We're not fighting in here. This is where you get taken care of. While we address the issues, the trauma, the wounds.
Yeah, I think for me it was having a lot of anxiety and low moods and panic attacks. I knew that, you know, something's not right. When I'm experiencing mental health, I knew that that's when I needed to get, you know, the help that I needed. So if you find yourself struggling mentally, physically, emotionally, or spiritually, you know, that might be your sign that maybe you're not living in your true self and you may need to be free. So go and seek that help that you need. So breaking free from generation trauma. So acknowledge the pain. Recognizing past trauma in its first steps to healing. So recognizing, yes, we have been through something, there is something going on, is the first step to healing, as you said, awareness. Yeah, and then going to get the support that you need. So it could be therapy, mental health support, professional help to help break these harmful cycles that we're in. So changing parenting patterns, so raising children with emotional awareness can prevent passing down trauma.
But it needs to be spoke about. It needs to be called out. Like I said to you at the beginning of the show, stigma silences. Fear silences. All of these things silence. Unless we speak about things and bring it out of the darkness into the light, how can we possibly address it?
When you're saying that, what comes to my mind is that shame and guilt. People feel shameful of what's happened to them and what they've been through. And they also feel guilty as well. But then how long are you going to hide in this shame and guilt, people? How long is this going to go on for? You know, you really have to think within ourselves and look not just within you, but generations to come. You may be, you know, you're here, next minute we're gone, but there are going to be people coming after you. Is that what you want for your family, for leaving your legacy behind, that they're carrying this on?
Yeah, because the thing is, otherwise, children, which will be our children, and if it's not our children, it will be their children, that are clearing up the backlog of mess that we haven't managed to address.
Yeah. I do see a lot of people are trying, though, like I know my generation, they are trying to like break that cycle. I think sometimes it's difficult when there's still the generation before them on top of them, and they make it difficult, you know, for them to break these cycles. But it's not about them understanding. I think a lot of people are still trying to seek approval from people or permission. Like we spoke about in last week's show about seeking permission to be able to heal. You know, it's not about getting their approval. You know what's right deep down within yourself. You know, it's come to our conscious.
But
I think Allah brings it to our conscious
a
as well.
God-given right that you should heal, that your wounds should be addressed and taken care of. We shouldn't just have people constantly, metaphorically bleeding out, because that's what's happening. Too many people are in pain and not getting their pain addressed, and they are suffering silently, and I think that's the worst kind of pain.
Yeah.
If we do not address our generational trauma, it will deal with us and the generation that is to come.
That's what we're saying. It's going to be passed on. Is that what we want? Is this what really we want? And if you see someone trying to do their best to change behaviors, don't think of it as a bad thing. You know, think of it as someone's trying to make that change when some people may not have the courage to do so or have the support to be able to do so.
I think we need to encourage those uncomfortable conversations with safe, healthy individuals and places and environments that is conducive to healing and growth.
Yeah, I remember last week's session you were saying that, you know, showing that having that empathy, for example, is who we are. You know, it doesn't have to be in the counselling area. So if the society can show more empathy towards individuals, show more, you know, not being judgmental, that can open space.
But even before showing it to others, have it for yourself.
As well, yeah.
Because you can't give that which you don't have.
Yeah.
A lot of the time we often get told that we should be this and that to everybody else, but also those things are applicable to our own selves.
No, most definitely. It comes from ourselves and then we're able to give.
Yeah.
Yeah? So if you're able to address that within ourselves, if we have that more in the society, then we are able to have a healthier society.
And where healing can take place, not just in a therapeutic space.
Yeah. And that will be in a, you know, much larger scale, wouldn't it?
Definitely.
You know, so challenging mental health stigma, to talk openly about, you know, our emotions, breaking harmful patterns. So if silence was the norm, start having these deep conversations, exploring yourself, exploring our feelings and emotions, to find a therapist or a mentor, professional help to process this inherited trauma. Forgive and release. Past generations did their best with what they knew. Now it's time to heal.
Totally in agreement with that statement, Shaila.
So local support services in Leicester. So we have Leicester Centre for Trauma and Resilience, and they specialise in therapy of generational trauma. We have got the Black and Minority Ethnic Mental Health Services in Leicester, which are culturally sensitive to mental health support. We've got the Tomorrow Project, their suicide prevention and crisis support. We have Samaritans as well that are available 24/7, and they offer emotional support for anyone struggling. We also have Shama Women's Centre on 0116 4747. I just forgot the number there for a minute. And also Jo has her own counselling. And what's your contact number, Jo?
Good question. But I can be found today on Psychology Today, online, Amite Counselling.
I'll tell Jo's number. It's 07398635337. So I'll repeat that again, 07398635337. So the quote of the day, you said a really brilliant quote. Repeat that again, Jo.
If you do not address your generational trauma, it will deal with you and the generation that is to come.
Yes. You are not responsible for the wounds inflicted upon you, but you are responsible for your healing. That's by Dr. Thelma Brighton. And that's so true, you know, that we have to take that responsibility to be able to heal ourselves, rather than wait and not do nothing about it, and not to be worried or fearful that to seek that support. Before, you know, growing up, when I, you know, first started counselling, it wasn't that the help wasn't there that much. But now I see so many, like, for example, mental health cafes.
Yes.
I see a lot of, you know, mental health hubs, society, all these things that they do together as a community. You know, tap into those kind of resources that are available.
There is more services, there is more help, but the fear is still there.
Yes.
And the stigma is still there.
Yeah.
So as long as fear resides and the stigma is still there, it still is a barrier to a lot of people going and accessing the help that they need.
Yeah. So if you do find yourself fearful, try and make that step. You know, I know it may be difficult, and this is where anxiety plays a part. But when you feed the anxiety, when you feed the fear, then it grows.
Yes.
So the more you're, withholding or reframing from getting that support, the more this is growing inside of you.
And fear is the root cause for a lot of things we do or don't do.
Yeah. So try and still, push yourself, even that first step. Even if you just get yourself out the door, that's one thing you've accomplished.
Even if they can't do that.
Yeah.
Even if they just have a moment and they sit and they become aware.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you and I both know it can take somebody years before they enter a therapeutic space or they go and get help.
And, therapy...
It's a process.
Is not just face-to-face. There's so many types of therapies. I offer therapy on Zoom. I offer it on the telephone because I know it can be difficult, for people to go out or to see people and, to tell them certain things that they're being through to a stranger. At first, I think that. So there are different ways that we can reach out to get that support that's available in different ways, face-to-face, online, and via telephone. So think about that. Think about how, if you're going through difficulties, if you're one of those who know that you're trapped in the generational trauma and with stigma, think about ways now, how can we undo this? How can we move forward, be better, be healthy, be safe for the next generation and to come?
Indeed, Shaila.
Yeah. So our next week, we'll be here, I'm sure it's 1 till 2 next week, our next episode. So next week we'll be understanding toxic relationships, emotional abuse, trauma bonds, and how to heal from an unhealthy love and relationship. So please stay tuned as well for our show next week as well.
That will be an interesting one.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people are struggling with their relationships and understanding the differences between what's healthy and what's not.
Definitely. And I think that's also how, the generational, what they know of what a relationship meant to be. Like when we looked at stigma and generation trauma, staying in a marriage no matter what, because it's shamed upon, frowned upon. Some people have actually been disowned because they've left their marriage, whether it's a male or female, because it's that much emphasis they have in the society, and this is what they've been taught from generations. And, you see a lot of people, have you seen the divorce rates gone high a bit?
I know.
Why do you think that is?
We're living in a very different world.
Yes. And
Very
I think a lot of
different
it may be because
Yeah.
people are breaking those generational traumas because they're not having it. They're not enduring the years and years of what people have gone through. They see it now clear cut, it's not going to work. And I know that the rate, it looks like, it's a high rate. But when I look at it, like I say, I don't see the figures, I see what's behind it.
Yeah.
I always look beneath it. I need to go under. Why is it so high? What's going on with these people?
But also next week we won't just be looking at heterosexual relationships. We'll be looking at the relationships that we have with ourselves in regards to siblings, in regards to parents. So it's across the board relationships. Because relationships at its core is about connections.
It's all about connection, and we have different types of relationship. And the most important one is what we have with ourselves.
Indeed. And with God, of course.
Yes, of course. Yes. So I hope you found today's session interesting and hope that it's brought awareness to people out there. And I hope that you all stay tuned and join us next week.
Look forward to seeing you all then.
Assalamu alaikum
Take care.
wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.